Sorry. My name is Diana Conway. I'm the president of the Women's Democratic Club. WDC is an vibrant organization of women and men. We have over 60 years of history behind the club with advocacy and political engagement. We have a number of events going on year-round, especially now with Zooms. We seem to have more than ever. We have a lot of active committees. We would love to have your participation. You can see them here, and they're, of course, listed on our website. Love to have you get in and get involved. WDC is hosting a rash of events coming up. November 20th, we'll have Council Member Will Jawando talking about reimagining county policing. It's an initiative which is, of course, matched at the state level as well as national. November 23rd, we'll have Judge Nicole Bershon discussing women's suffrage on the 100th anniversary and the election of our first vice president-elect, who's a woman. December 2nd, the Marshall Project, the president of the Marshall Project is coming. Marshall Project, if you're not familiar with it, is a Pulitzer-winning research organization focused specifically on criminal justice reform. And December 9th, we will have John McCarthy, who's been our state's attorney in Montgomery County for many years. So you may be seeing a theme here. We have not yet scheduled Diana Phillip, who's the executive director of NARAL, Maryland Pro-Choice. We had her scheduled for before the election and seemed a little busy. So let's see. Oh yeah, sorry. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. Please submit your questions through the Zoom chat, and you will see the ID for WDC Q&A, and those will get to me. So first, thank you to everybody. I'm going to make a couple announcements before we introduce Fred. I really want to just say thank you to everybody who was involved in this election. It remains a wild ride. We've just elected Joe Biden and wow, Kamala Harris, finally. I think the world was really jubilant. People were dancing in the streets. I feel like we need a big sign that says under new management to put above the White House. So really, this is just a formal thank you for everybody who was involved, whether it was writing letters or making phone calls, making your kids register to vote, sending money to worthy causes. We got over 75 million votes, and while it's disturbing that over 70 million voted for the current president, we made our point. And I will mention it again at the end, but really the upcoming runoff in Georgia for those 2 U.S. Senate seats on January 5th could not be more important. If we've worked this hard to get this far, the idea of grabbing those 2 seats and getting a 50-50 split in the Senate that then Vice President Harris will be able to break is critical. So while you should celebrate, don't let up yet. We need you between now and January 5th, and WDC will be working with the state and county parties on coordinating fundraising, get out the vote, voter registration, whatever they ask us for. Okay, so here we are with the coronavirus, with police killings and civil unrest, with devastating wildfires and violent storms and climate change, and a historic presidential election capped with legal efforts to disenfranchise millions of voters. So who knows what's coming next? Let me introduce our speaker today. Fred Yang has been a friend of WDC's for a while. You've probably seen him on a number of network shows. Mr. Yang is a partner at Hart Research Associates and a founding principal of its political division, Garin Hart Yang Research Group. One of America's leading public opinion and market research firms for nearly 4 decades, representing nonprofit institutions, advocacy organizations, labor unions, corporations, the media, and of course, politics. Mr. Yang counts several US senators among his clients, including our 2 Maryland senators, Chris Van Hollen and Ben Cardin, as well as Pennsylvania's Bob Casey and Nevada's Catherine Cortez Masto. He's also the pollster for 12 current members of the US House and others such as Brian Frosch, our own Attorney General, the Attorney General of Connecticut, and the newly elected Governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. Mr. Yang is also a regular contributor to networks and cable television news programs like MSNBC's MTP Daily, and has been part of NBC's news coverage of the national election returns since 2008. He's a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Stanford, got his start in politics at age 14 when he worked at a state assemblyman's district office. And most importantly, Mr. Yang and his wife Lori are the proud parents of Grace, who's a sophomore at Villanova, Olivia, and Natalie. So with that, Fred, welcome back to WDC, and we can't wait to hear from you. Hold on, we're not hearing you, Fred. We had the audio working before.
There we go. Can you hear me now, Diana, everyone?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. So, wow, I just had a great emotional introduction, and thank you, but I guess I'll have to start again. No, I have always enjoyed talking to the WDC. I have to admit, Diana and Barbara, thank you for the invitation. I come for the lunch, but I stay for the speech. So I know many things all of us are sacrificing, small things, big things. And seriously, I know Zoom is great for the most part, and it's just, gives us a lot of flexibility. But no, I really feel like when I'm with the WDC and trying to unpack difficult elections, right? I was there in 2018 and 2016. 2020 will be equally complex. I always felt being there with you was sort of very, not just comforting, but I felt like I was in company of good friends, and we were all just trying to figure this out together. So, having said that, we are all trying to figure this out together. I know when I first started, when we first started the scheduling for my post-election talk, I think there had been some discussion of maybe having it last week. I'm glad we waited. And, I'm a very polite person, as you all know. My kids my daughters who've come to our lunches, are even more polite than me, kind of feel odd talking about an election in which one person hasn't officially conceded, but I think actually that person probably won't ever concede. So we'll just sort of put politeness aside and talk about the election that Donald Trump did lose and will continue to lose. The one thing I will say, obviously, folks, is a lot of votes are still being counted, and literally, I do this because I can't help it. The New York Times has a great link where they refresh the election results from all the states, and I continue to do it because, as we speak, more votes are being counted. So really, the final tally won't be known for a couple months. Okay, so that's just a preface of saying thank you, and how all of us, starting, I guess, today, unpack the 2020 election will be an ongoing effort. Okay. Couple things about the 2020 elections based on polls and actual results. Number one was the sky-high interest. This is one of the questions we ask in our NBC News Wall Street Journal survey, which my firm, a Democratic firm, conducts with Public Opinion Strategies, a Republican firm. And this is the interest in election question. So you can see, going back to 2004, in the last poll before the election, these numbers show how interested are you in the election. And if you look just on the left-hand side, you can see that the interest in the 2020 election at 83%, 9 or 10, matched the level of enthusiasm for the Obama-McCain election in 2008. Obviously, different reasons for enthusiasm and interest between 2020 and 2008, but usually interest in elections correlates to voting behavior. And all of the polls, actually, starting with the November 2018 midterms up through 2019 and obviously 2020, showed the American public was intensely interested in the 2020 election. It is interesting, though, I think you'll concede, is even looking 4 years ago in our last poll for the Clinton-Trump election, that, 72% is a high number, but it was among the lowest numbers of interest for a presidential election since 2004. Anyway, high level of interest in 2020. The next chart shows why that mattered. Is usually high level of interest correlates to higher voting patterns. And we have right now, as of yesterday, 152 million people who voted, which is 16 million more than 2016. And if you look at the chart I have, the voter turnout, in other words, the percent of people who voted versus the eligible voting population, was the highest since 1908. So that's why numbers are great. You can tell lots of different stories, or you can tell the same story actually with different numbers. 152 million votes, that's a lot of people, but also the fact that we had the highest share of vote since at least 1908, again, underscores the historic nature of the 2020 election. Okay, next chart. This is the 2016 Electoral College Map. Just some bad history. You can see that there are the swath of Midwestern states next to Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Those used to be called the Blue Wall states. Obviously, our blue wall wasn't there in 2016, and you can see the coasts and then the middle of the country, stark differences in who they voted for president in 2016. If we look at the 2020 Electoral College Map, it's a little different. First of all, you'll notice the blue wall came back. So look, and I remember, as we all do, October and up through the election, there were, and we'll talk about this, there were polls saying that Biden could win Georgia, or Biden could win North Carolina, that Texas was in play, and Florida. Florida is our Charlie Brown and Lucy. It's always a state that Democrats think we're on the verge of winning, and then somehow it gets taken away from us. But look, the polling showed that North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, the southwestern states were all in play, and they were. But I think the one thing we can credit, among many things, the Biden campaign for is they never took their eye off the fact that you win the presidency by rebuilding the blue wall. You get margins by winning these toss-up states, and that's what they did. So compared to 2016, obviously, they flipped Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. That's where he won the presidency. For some odd reason, Joe Biden won the 2nd District of Nebraska. There are 2 states in the country that allocate their electoral votes by congressional district. So to give Donald Trump some credit, he did flip one state, which was the 2nd District of Maine. Mrs. Clinton won it in 2016. Donald Trump won the 2nd District of Maine in 2020. But everything else that flipped between 2016 and 2020, obviously since Joe Biden won, flipped to Joe Biden's advantage. Next chart is sort of, I like to go big and small. So this is back to big, just sort of putting the 2020 election in broader context. We flipped the White House, obviously, won 1 seat in the Senate so far, lost 11 seats in the House so far. Republicans gained 2 chambers of the legislature, and Republicans flipped 1 governor's seat. So in general, look, the biggest prize is the presidency. That if you could only have 1 flip, that's the one you'd want it to be. But again, sort of a mixed verdict below the presidential race. Okay, what happened in some of these battleground states in 2016 versus 2020? There were a lot of close elections. Okay, So, for example, one of the close elections was in Georgia, where Trump won Georgia by 5% in 2016. Currently, President-elect Biden is up by 12,000 votes. Most of the states, obviously, because Biden won, shows movement. The blue circle are the 2016 results. The green is 2020. For the most part, you can see a lot of movement toward Biden. And these are charts. Some of these charts are from Bruce Mehlman. Even though he's a Republican strategist, he does really excellent sort of nonpartisan charts. So this chart just tells it what it is. Movement for Biden in Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, and a slight movement away from Mr. Biden in Florida. But again, a lot of close races, right? Most of these races were in the single digits in both 2016 and 2020. A lot of close races, but this time the close races broke to Joe Biden and the Democrats. All right, so the one thing is yes, the polls, if you took the national polls, we can have a whole nother session on the state polls. If you took the last week of national polls, the poll of polls average was that Joe Biden would get 52% of the popular vote nationally, and that President Trump would get 43%. And so that netted out to a 9% Biden win. Again, if you took all the polls in the last 5 days of the campaign, which would be fair because those are the polls conducted and released closest to the election. Now, as of a couple days ago, actually this should be fixed. I think right now Biden is ahead 51 to 47. I think projections are he may win the popular vote by 6 points when all the votes are counted, but clearly a 9-point Biden prediction from the polls versus a 6-point. The polls were a little off, at least nationally. Going back to election night, it's very clear President Trump doesn't understand math or lots of other things. And look, I think everyone. Here's an interesting thing about the election 2020 and election night. By mid-December, we will have all the votes counted. And I think if mid-December were election night, I think there would be less angst because all the votes are counted. And it's interesting. We all have first impressions cemented in our head. And look, for a lot of us, election night was really tough because it wasn't over election night. It went to election night Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I know the tension, the uncertainty seemingly, contributed to the anxiety. It's funny if we knew on election night what we're going to know mid-December, I think the feeling might be a little different, and a lot of that, folks, is because of A, the pandemic, and B, how the pandemic changed voting patterns. So this chart, it's a simple chart, not a lot of bells and whistles like my other charts, but I think it's very simple. In the United States, of the total vote so far, and again, it's still being counted, so some of these numbers will change. Of the total vote as of like a couple days ago, 29% of the country voted on November 3rd. And with those 29%, Donald Trump won by 32 points. Okay? 71% of the country voted before November 3rd, whether in late September, like some places in North Dakota, Minnesota, or even our Maryland, right? We have absentee voting plus early voting. 71% of the country voted before November 3rd, and Joe Biden won those votes 58 to 40. When you add it all up, and this is simple math, Biden is ahead overall by 5 or 6 points because, as we know, and the president does seem to get this, a vote is a vote, no matter when it was cast. Now, one of the problems or just challenges of election night, and this election sort of laid bare that just because we're one country with a set of rules for some things, each state sets its own rules for A, how you vote, and B, when you count the votes. And let's just take the example of Pennsylvania, all right? So as we all know, in the state of Pennsylvania, and this was part of the difficulty in calling the race for Joe Biden, was because of Pennsylvania, through the logic of the Republican legislature, they would not even open their early votes until Election Day. Some other states, Florida, North Carolina, they would open the ballots and compare the signatures. Georgia, they would open the ballot like a week before the election, compare the signatures, make sure it was a valid vote, okay, and then they would set it aside to be counted on Election Day. They didn't even do that step in Pennsylvania. They would not allow any early votes to be even opened, to be verified, until the polls had closed on Election Day. So most of the coverage was about how Donald Trump had a big lead in Pennsylvania, and he did, because in Pennsylvania, on Election night, the votes that they counted first were the votes that were cast on Election Day. And you can see on Election Day, Donald Trump beat Joe Biden by 22 points. However, there was at least a third, and that number could be higher, of Pennsylvania votes that were cast before Election Day that weren't counted until Election Day and later, where Joe Biden won by 54. And again, it's simple arithmetic. If you add up all these numbers, and again, a vote is a vote is a vote, Joe Biden won and will win Pennsylvania. It's just, look, a lot of people forgot that. The patchwork of what votes get counted when, caused a lot of confusion. But I'm saying that it was pretty clear, obviously, that the pandemic changed how and when people voted. And I think a lot of that impacted, obviously, at least the coverage of the election, but not the outcome. Okay. Moving back to Biden and Trump. And I know this is a very complicated chart. Let me explain to you one of the differences between 2020 and 2016, between victory and defeat, were the different images of the Democratic candidates. So if you look on the left-hand side, Mrs. Clinton, in our NBC Wall Street Journal polling, in the last poll in October, her feeling thermometer, her image, was 38 positive, 53 negative. She was minus 15. And you can see basically from September of 16 till the end, her image stayed the same, which was negative. Okay? Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden in September was 43 positive, 45 negative, minus 2. He ended a campaign at 45 positive, 42 negative, plus 3. Joe Biden got more, look, okay, minus 2 to plus 3, that's not night and day, but it is movement. And part of Joe Biden's victory, I believe, was the fact that, A, he started off, obviously, less polarizing than Mrs. Clinton, right? Minus 2 for Biden in September of 20 versus minus 15 for Clinton in September 16. He not only was less polarizing, he showed movement in his overall popularity. I think that's there's that old saying that President Kennedy said after the Bay of Pigs, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. There are going to be many, many reasons for why Joe Biden won this election. One of the many, many reasons will be he had a better image than Mrs. Clinton. Another reason why Joe Biden will have won is Donald Trump never improved his image beyond his base. This is a bar graph of all the polls we've taken from left, which is February of 2017, all the way to the right, which is our last poll before the 2020 election. Donald Trump started his presidency In February of 2017, at 44% approved, Donald Trump ended his presidency in the green at 45 approved. He never improved. Okay? Number two, the red are Republicans, the blue are Democrats, gray are independents. The lack of movement among Republicans, independents, and Democrats, for the most part, toward President Trump is pretty astonishing. That basically what we thought we got in February 2017 never wavered. Okay? Never wavered despite a strong economy, right? And actually, to be fair to him, never wavered after coronavirus. It was very much set in stone. And why is that important? In most incumbent races, whether it's president or county council, the incumbent's job rating has a strong correlation to their vote. So the last two times an incumbent president lost in the late 20th century, in 1992, George H.W. Bush's job rating in the October 1992 poll was 40%. His share of the popular vote was 37.4%. In 2020, Donald Trump's job rating in the last NBC News Wall Street Journal poll was 45%. His share of the vote is going to be 46 or 47. Again, if you're that far below 50 as an incumbent, you're likely to lose. And that's what happened to both Bush in 92 and Trump in 2020. Okay, what is not different from 2020 to 2016? Number one, Trump won the late deciders. In 2016, Trump beat Mrs. Clinton by 3 points among the voters who voted Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Okay, the 3-point national margin doesn't seem that big, but remember, she won the national popular vote by 3 points overall, so that took a chunk out of the Clinton vote. And in 2020, according to the exit polls, Trump won the late deciders by 15 points. I think that's one of the reasons why, and look, there could be theories as to why this happened, and I think this had ramifications, especially for Senate and congressional races. We're still trying to figure out who voted and trying to correlate that with all the polls. But, Trump really finished strongly. He won by 15 points in the exit polls. And the other thing is there were fewer hold-your-nose voters, voters who disliked both candidates. In 2016, Trump won the hold-your-nose voters by 17 points. In 2020, Trump won the hold-your-nose voters by 19 points. But in 2016, 18% of voters disliked Clinton and Trump. In 2020, only 4% of voters disliked Trump and Biden. So he did better with the hold-your-nose voters. There just were a lot fewer of them in 2020 than 2016. Okay, a couple charts that only pollsters, data people, and WDC members would enjoy, which is, again, it's difficult to fully analyze an election that's in which the votes are still being counted, but thanks to exit polls and some other analysis, we are having a little bit more clarity of what was different between 2020 and 2016. And some of that is a mixed bag, is that there were some groups, white non-college men, suburban voters, seniors, where Biden performed better than Clinton. So, for example, in suburban America, in 2016, Clinton lost by 2, Biden won 2020 by 10. So the blue numbers are where Biden improved. There were some groups where Trump improved versus Clinton 4 years ago. Some of these are small numbers. I mean, 18 to 29-year-olds, the exit poll said Trump won 30%, compared to Trump winning 25% in 2016. No matter how you slice it, he got walloped with younger people, but Trump did improve a little bit with younger people, improved a little bit with Latino women, approved a lot with Latino men. And obviously, I know there are a bunch of questions about some of these results, some of the results with minority groups. Believe me, we're all unpacking it. But there were certain parts of the country, Texas, Florida, where it was tougher for Biden, other parts of the country where it was tougher for Trump. But again, those are all good questions, and all of us trying to unpack it. But I think this is a good chart that shows, for a first blush look, a week after an election, in which the votes are still being counted, kind of where there were some differences with some of these important subgroups, differences that were strong for Biden and strong for Trump. And again, this great chart comes from Bruce Melman's deck. A couple other things is looking at other groups. If we look at white voters overall, Donald Trump won white voters by 16 points, 58-42. Trump won white voters by 21 points in 2016. You can see, again, overall how Biden did with black voters and Hispanic and Latino voters. I think there's a very important note. And again, these numbers come so far from exit polls. Exit polls are great because they actually poll people who said they voted or they're intercepted at the polls. But just like other polling, it's still being analyzed and aggregated. The one important and interesting result from the exit poll, if true, will not be the share of the vote, who won what vote, but that little asterisk I have that in the 2016 exit polls, 7 out of 10 voters were white, and in the 2020 exit polls so far, 65% of the electorate is white, that the white vote is shrunk a little bit between 2020 and 2016. And then a couple other crosstabs that weren't in the Melman deck. If you look at independent voters, which we highlighted, Donald Trump won independents by 6 points in 2016. Joe Biden won independents by 14 points in 2020. So that's another difference between Clinton and Biden, is how strongly the vice president performed with independent voters. Mentioned the suburbs before. Trump won the suburbs by 4 points in 2016. Joe Biden won by 3 points in 2020. And then this next chart, which I really like, this was in the Post this weekend. This shows, obviously, the map of the United States, and it has blue arrows and red arrows, and this shows the counties where the votes moved toward the Democrats between 16 and 20. Those would be all the blue arrows. And then the counties where the votes went stronger for Trump in 16. Those would be the red arrows. And look, for the most part, not surprisingly, if you would overlay this chart, which looks at the vote shift by county, there's a strong correlation to the Electoral College Map, right, in which, for the most part, other than Georgia, President Trump carried the South, and you can see there's a lot of red in the South. But you can see there are, parts of a state, you can't see that, New York State, a lot of red in rural New York State, and you can see even in states that President Trump lost, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there are areas of red where his vote did improve over 2016. Okay, bring it back down to the local level. This was from an NBC News post over the weekend. 3 examples of the vote shift in 3 key states and 3 key counties, and again, helps tell the story of why Joe Biden won. Wisconsin, Dane County, the city of Madison. Joe Biden not only won Dane County by 53%, which was 6 points better than Mrs. Clinton 4 years ago, there were 35,000 more votes cast in Dane County. So in Dane County, Wisconsin, part of the Wisconsin victory, slightly higher Biden margin, slightly higher turnout, translates into strong showing in Dane County, Wisconsin. Wayne County, Michigan, Detroit area. Biden and Clinton won Wayne County by the same vote. Biden and Clinton won Wayne County by 37 points. But in 2020, 861,000 people cast votes in Wayne County compared to 782,000. Just that difference would have overcome the 11,000 vote deficit Hillary had in 2016. So in other words, 80,000 more people voted in Wayne County this year, even though their result was the same. If those 80,000 people had voted 4 years ago, Hillary would have carried Michigan. So vote share didn't change, but the number of people who voted did change. And finally, in the other Montgomery County, I know a lot of us have been there. Believe me, our Montgomery County is far superior to their Montgomery County, but it's also a Democratic area, so we should be nice to them. Biden won Montgomery County, Pennsylvania by 26 points. That was 5 points better than Hillary did in 2016. So Montgomery County plus 21 Clinton in 16, plus 26 Biden in 20, so stronger for Biden. But also 38,000 more people voted in 2020 than 2016. Again, part of the Pennsylvania story of how Biden was able to win Pennsylvania. The other part of the Pennsylvania story is in 2016, despite what you may have heard or read, Hillary Clinton got the turnout and the vote share she needed out of Philadelphia to win a statewide race based on past election data. Okay, again, city of Philadelphia, Hillary reached her mark. That if you just looked at Pennsylvania, her advantage over Trump, and how many Philadelphians voted, you would say she was going to win the race because she was doing as well as other Democrats had done who had won Pennsylvania. She lost Pennsylvania. So obviously it wasn't the Philadelphia problem. It was basically everywhere else. And look, when you look at, and I've worked for Bob Casey Jr. For 20 years. I know he was on TV with his sweater and his old-fashioned map. But when you study the election returns with someone who knows Pennsylvania like Bob Casey Jr., it was for Mrs. Clinton and Democrats in 2016 kind of death by 1,000 small counties. That all these small counties, Cambria County, 1,000 votes, Center County, 3,000 votes. The margins were so big that they were able to sort of overcome Philadelphia. Look, none of this is earth-shattering, but she lost Pennsylvania by a close margin, so any vote shift matters, and ergo, in 2020, any vote shift toward Biden matters too in a state that's pretty competitive. Look at Northampton County. Trump won by 4 points in 2016. Biden won by 1. Erie County is in northwest Pennsylvania. Trump won by 2. Biden won by 1. Then these red counties, they're red counties, but you can see in Washington, Wayne, Westmoreland County is right outside of Pittsburgh. Biden cut into the margins. Luzerne County, which is right outside of Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Biden was able to cut Trump's margin from 19 to 15. So if the 2016 story for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania was he was able to eke out a victory because he won big shares of votes in lots of little places, that's kind of, in some part, besides the Philadelphia area, the story of Joe Biden's victory in Pennsylvania. He was able to cut into into Trump's vote share in all these little counties, and a 4-point improvement in Luzerne County, a 6-point improvement in Wayne County, a 2-point improvement in Westmoreland County. All of those added up where the math was able to work for Vice President Biden. Couple other things. What we are still learning about the 2020 election, and these are from the network exit polls. The number one issue that the exit pollsters found, and again, these were the 5 issues that voters were given, so these were only the issues they were given. So the number one issue was the economy at 35%. Donald Trump won those voters 82 to 17. Number 2, it was kind of surprising. Racial equality was the second most selected issue. Joe Biden won those folks 91 to 8. Coronavirus, we've been talking about it since mid-March. Not that it's unimportant, obviously, but 17% of Americans picked coronavirus as a top issue facing the country. Joe Biden won those issues 82 to 14. But again, it does show why the race was perhaps more competitive, maybe not winnable for Trump, but more competitive. Why the margin shrunk toward the end was, again, the economy leapt to the top of the issue agenda. Okay, I thought this other result from the exit poll was interesting. And again, these were the only 4 items that voters were given the choice of. What's the most important quality you want in your president? 32% of Americans picked strong leader. Okay, look, for the most part, these issues, there's no strong demarcation, but a plurality picked strong leader as a top issue. Trump won those people 71-28. Then you had good judgment, uniting the country for obvious reasons. Biden won those voters very strongly. I thought an interesting thing, though, was of the 21% who selected, the most important quality for president, for me, is cares about people, that Joe Biden and Donald Trump were basically tied. Okay, keeping going. What did we learn about the 2020 election so far? I'm still going through the results, as I'm sure a lot of you are. Maybe I'm a little ahead of you because I knew I had to prepare for this presentation, so I looked at it more. This was one of the surprising results to me, this question right here. How would you rate efforts to control the coronavirus? 48% of Americans said efforts to control the coronavirus was going very or somewhat well, 48%. 50%, so half, the other half, said it was going badly. And again, no surprise, if you thought coronavirus was going well, you voted for Trump. If you thought coronavirus was going badly, for the most part, you voted for Biden. But again, I was surprised at how close the going well and going badly was. Now, despite the division in how people feel about efforts to control COVID, wearing a mask, as those commercials say, is not a political statement. The same exit poll, the same country that was split on how well the effort was going, they pretty much said overwhelmingly, you should wear a face mask. It's a public health responsibility. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why that result about coronavirus is so interesting and so important is because it says something about the media and our media consumption. And again, this is from the deck by Bruce Melman, which he has a lot of great results. If your news only comes from Fox News and other conservative outlets, you said by 92.9, the U.S. controlled the outbreak as much as it could. Okay? 92.9 if you're a Fox News OAN viewer. If you are the segment of our electorate, of our country, whose news came from MSNBC, CNN, or NPR, you said we were not controlling it by 97 to 3. Okay? So when you look at this chart, that even as simple as where we get our news results in this kind of polarization, then really that helps explain this result in which the country is also divided on how they feel about how the coronavirus situation is going. A couple other charts, helps explain, again, why the race ended up being more competitive than I think we all thought. Again, this is from the exit poll. How would you rate the condition of the national economy? For November 2020, 48% of Americans said it was excellent or good. 52% said not so good or poor. Compared that to the same question in the 2016 exit polls. In 2016, Americans said by 62 to 36 the economy was in poor shape. Again, it's now 50-50. Okay? And then I thought this was another interesting result. How would you rate life for the next generation of Americans? In the 2020 exit poll, 53% said it would be better than today. 20% said be worse than today. 21% said be the same. So by 53 to 20, in the midst of all the things that Diana mentioned has sort of befallen our country in 2020, even with all those ills and problems and dynamics, in the 2020 exit poll, voters said by 53 to 20 that basically life for their kids would be better than today. Compare that to what was the answer 4 years ago. 4 years ago, what was life going to be like for the next generation of Americans? 37% better, 33% worse. And then ending on a couple charts. Mentioned earlier how President Trump won the late deciders, and that might have had an impact on some of the down ballot races. Just picked a couple of the key Senate races. We circled the candidates who won the races. So, for example, in Iowa, President Trump won Iowa with roughly 900,000 votes. Joni Ernst, unfortunately, won re-election, the Republican, by 864,000. You can see that there was not a lot of ticket splitting. Okay, that basically who won the presidential resulted in the same party candidate winning the Senate race. There was a difference in Maine. Joe Biden won Maine by 80,000 votes. Susan Collins won the Senate race by 60,000. But going back to what Diana said earlier about Georgia, I'm actually working for one of the Georgia candidates there, John Ossoff, and this is sort of really the strategy. 2.47 million Georgians voted for Joe Biden. If all those people who voted for Joe Biden vote on January 5th, we can pick up 2 Senate seats. Because a lot of the runoff, because there's drop-offs in votes and runoffs, a lot of the, and both parties know this, a lot of the strategy for winning the Georgia runoff is making sure your people who voted in November continue to vote in January 5th. And that is the end of my presentation.
Wow. Well, Fred, thank you so much for that. That was just tremendous. A lot to think about, a lot to chew on. The questions are pouring in. People are disregarding their instructions to put them in Q&A, and they're putting them out there for everybody. We're Democrats, after all. We don't follow instructions. So I want to recognize a couple of electeds I know are on the line. Cindy DeBalia, I believe. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, I think from Tacoma Park. And Susan Turnbull is out there somewhere. Jeffrey Slavin, who is the mayor of the town of Somerset, and State Delegate Jared Solomon from District 18 is out there. And if there are others, please make yourselves known, and love to recognize you, and also thank you for your service and for joining us. So you finished kind of looking at Georgia, and there are a lot of questions about Georgia. So let me put a couple of them together for you. And 2 other items. First, can you stay a little bit past 2 o'clock? Because we've got so many questions. Great. And then the second frequent question was, can we please have the slides? Can we make those available? Excellent. Yeah. And also, oh, thank you, Jared. Senator Shelley Heddleman is on the call, and it just disappeared. Somebody else. And Delegate Nicole Williams. Great, thank you. It's good to have representation from around the state. That's great. So Georgia, the early versus the day of voting in terms of how you get exit poll information, and specifically in Georgia, should people be going positive or negative? How would you advise people, meaning candidates, excuse me, how would you advise those two candidates? And I guess you are in fact doing that. Uh, and Depending on whether we get those two Senate seats, how do you think that's going to affect Joe Biden's ability to make cabinet nominations? So squish those together, and I'll be back. You're
Wow. Let's see. These are all great questions. I guess the look, the Republicans have already signaled they're going negative. They just released. So there's the great thing about Georgia and the complicated thing, because there's nothing that's entirely great, is there's two Senate seats up at the same time. So there's John Ossoff versus David Perdue, and then there is Reverend Warnock versus Senator Loeffler. Senator Loeffler has already attacked Reverend Warnock with two ads. One about, and particularly they've attacked him on defunding the police, continuing the attack on Democrats that a lot of Republicans did in the November elections. Look, I think one of the things we need to make sure we do is to help, just to sort of not make people realize, because they know this, that it's time to turn the page, that Trump has lost, and that we need to support the new president, and that that basically this country has a lot of problems, and the current administration couldn't get it done, and we need to give the new president a chance. So I think that is probably, and obviously the Republicans are going to try to change the subject and not talk about the future, not talk really about the economy or coronavirus, and do what they normally do. And to give them credit, it worked in some places, is they're going to try to vilify the Democratic opponent. So I think our best strategy is not the only strategy, because look, the other thing that's going to be very unique about Georgia with two Senate races, really holding the balance of power, at least for the first part of 2021, is if you can think of any group out there, progressive and otherwise, they will be involved in Georgia. So no, it is crazy. It's going to be, for every day, the biggest game in town.
Okay, thank you. In terms of polling, a lot of questions about the technology and the logistics of polling. Specifically, do exit polls include, or how do you account for vote by mail or early voting? And with the changes in technology, how is the polling industry going to adjust to not only sort of the typical cell phone question, but also apparently people who are either not getting reached or are lying to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, the exit polls are done pretty much they've always been done. That on election day, you have people at key precincts intercepting people as they leave their polling place, which is how exit polls had traditionally been done. Obviously, as one of my charts showed, I think a majority of Americans, a strong majority, voted before election day. They were called or contacted before. Basically, they did a poll of early voters. So exit polls, as they've always been, have tried hard to contact people who've actually voted, and that was both in person, as has been done in the past, but a lot of it is by telephone and online, because you can't, if you voted on October 12th, you're not going to show up at the polls on November 3rd. So that's how exit polls are done. I think the question about polling is a great question. I don't have the answer to it. I don't know, first of all, if it's as much people lying more now than they've ever. Actually, that is not how pollsters would say it. I guess I would say Pollster would say people have been inconsistent ever since the beginning of time. So that's not much different. I do think it is a stronger critique and improvement we have to make is once again trying to figure out in a environment in which it is harder, communication is more diffused. Reaching the right people is a challenge, and I think I'm not comparing polling to what I'm going to say next. It's just the only thing I can think of. I'm tired. If we can go to the moon, we can figure out polling. But there are challenges to it, no doubt about it. And I know I'm a Democratic pollster, but I know Republicans face the same issues also. And look, it's anywhere from is there something not about a shy Trump voter, because a shy Trump voter, under the common parlance is you call someone up and they're too shy to tell you on the phone or online if you're voting for Donald Trump. It's are we even reaching those people in the first place? I mean, I think that's, and look, the other thing is I had that chart of the polls earlier. Some of those polls were traditional telephone, online, or a live caller polls. Other of those were online. Even others were automated. And each of those three polling methodologies, there was no one polling methodology that was completely right. So again, the myth of the shy Trump voter, I'm not sure that's 100% true, because yes, I can understand you may feel uncomfortable telling a live person on the phone that you're voting for Donald Trump, but then if you're receiving a robocall and you're pressing a 1 or a 2, or you're doing an online survey, I'm not sure why you would be more shy for that than from a live telephone call. I do think the issue, again, all of us are facing is, are we even reaching the right people in the first place? And if the answer is no, how are we going to readjust to get those right people in the first place?
So that raises a question for me, which is the issue the cost of trying to find those people? Is it a money issue, or is it literally like you don't know how to go about it?
No, I think well, I hate to sort of say, Diana and everyone, it's as simple as money, but a lot of the University of Chicago and their National Opinion Research Center and other academic institutions have really accurate polls. And because I think a lot of these academic polls are in person. So, they're in person. The issue with that is I'm not gonna embarrass people by giving the figures, but those kind of polls take a long time. I mean, think about it. If you're doing a national survey and you're doing it in person, I mean, it's not Fred Yang going in person all across the country. I mean, you have a billion Fred Yangs talking to people. It still takes time to do door-to-door in person, plus they're very expensive. Mm-hmm. So the only way I'll put it is, I know there are a bunch of in-person polls would really only be practical for people running for the highest office in the land. And so, again, I don't want to be misquoted or misunderstood. It's not just about the money. It's not just money. But reaching the right people on landlines, on cell phones, online, text to web, I think some of the answer is costs. But look, I think the other thing is, and we're again, I know all firms are. Our Hart Research is also undergoing a strong internal review. Do we need to make our questionnaire shorter, so fewer people hang up after 10 minutes?
Right.
So yeah, so it's more than just money, but there are a lot of other factors that go into making sure polls are accurate.
Okay. The next category of questions I think I would put in the why. So why the Latino men, why the white women, why it did, and then a specific one was, did the decarbonization position that Joe Biden took at the end of that second in-person debate, did that have an effect on Latino men and or the Texas vote? Meaning the discussion that he and Trump got into at the very end of the second debate about oil versus natural gas and decarbonizing our economy. But specifically, why specific groups, even if you predicted them wrong, why would, certain groups like him? Tell us.
I think first of all, there are lots of analysts, probably even right now, conducting, multitudes of post-election surveys with the groups you mentioned, Diana, and other groups. Look, I think, and this sounds like I'm sort of avoiding the question, which I kind of am. I think that they're clearly, more than the election results per se, there were a bunch of congressional races in South Florida and in Texas that Democrats lost, that Democrats thought we had a good chance of winning. And a lot of those races had large minority populations, right? Okay, so that's one thing. That's true. I do think we, I know this sounds, I'm going back to sort of my message and sticking to it. Not all the votes have been counted. I think we're trying to figure this out. I know when all the votes are counted that people raised about these groups will still persist. Okay, it's not like all the votes will be counted and Joe Biden will have won the Latino vote 80 points. That's not going to happen. That's not the way it works. But I do think part of understanding how and why people voted is trying to figure out who voted, where they're from, and all these things. I know this is a bad word to say these days. It takes time, and we have to get the full data. Now, look, people have speculated as to why Trump did better and the other thing, Diana, everyone, is with some of these groups, was it, I know it's two sides of the same coin, was it Trump did better or Biden did worse? I know it's the same thing, but really it's different. It's because Trump did worse. Was it something about his personality, right? Something about his issues that turned some groups off? Or for Trump, was it something about his personality or his issue set, right, that made him more attractive? Look, I can't speculate right now. I just think, and the thing I will say is, and all of us fall into this pattern. I don't know if Bell is on, but I've done 3 polls in 2020 on the AAPI community, and you
Asian American Pacific Islander.
Right. You see the crosstab in the exit polls. With the Asian American Pacific Islander vote, Joe Biden won by 30 points. But as I knew this before, but I know in spades now that is one descriptor of a group that includes Japanese Americans who vote for Donald Trump by 40 points. That also includes Vietnamese Americans who voted for Donald Trump, and includes Filipino Americans who are split 50-50. And so, I'm trying to sort of be cognizant of all that. Is the Latino vote is not a monolith. It's not just the different ethnic groups. It's the different ethnic groups by where they live. So all I'm saying is, and this would be my answer for everything, including trends, everyone, that are positive. We won't really know till all the votes are counted. We won't know until we know more. But whether it's the Latino community or the AAPI community, even white college-educated voters, a lot of it. I think one of the things we've learned in this election that we keep relearning is it's not just sort of that there are a lot of different factors that go into these different trends.
who were the additional 16 million voters? Do you have any sense of that yet, or is it too soon?
Hey, thank you. It is a little too soon, but roughly, well, we know that about 10 to 14% of the electorate were first-time voters, and that they voted for the most part for Joe Biden. But obviously, and look, I think the other 10 to 15% were new voters. I think one of my charts said that in 2016, about 140 million voted in the Hillary Trump election. So 10 to 15% new voters. Yeah, that would actually, the math works out to where we would have 150, 160 people vote this time. I think one of the things we're still looking at, and I'm sorry, everyone, I know, and I expect myself to have all the answers, but it's still sort of, we're still sort of counting the numbers. Look, I think all of us, so it's me too, we're under the presumption that record turnout would be great for us, for Democrats. That if you had every American vote, we would win in a walk. And again, while I think a lot of new people who voted did vote for Joe Biden, not sure that really high turnout was as beneficial to us as we thought. And look, and then Diana, everyone, I hate to go back to sort of votes are counted. I do think sort of the disposition of when people voted, because you all remember, and I know it seems like it was so long ago, but it wasn't. Remember that last weekend up to Halloween? So I remember last weekend because it was Halloween. There was no real Halloween. The news was reporting 100 million Americans had voted early. On CNN they had that scroll of how many Americans had voted early. And look, we know, and from some of those charts I showed you, we know that the early vote favored Joe Biden, the Democrats. Okay, and I remember saying this on some Zoom calls I was on before the election. Is it looked really good, and look, the polls looked really good, but one thing we didn't know was the actual turnout. So I wish I'd talked to one of my daughters who's I don't really know what subjects they have in high school, but I think algebra, maybe this is an algebra thing, is with the early voters, we knew the numerator, the number on top. We didn't know the denominator, what the total number was going to be. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, everyone, look, first of all, having the highest turnout since 1908 at least, I think that's a good thing for our country. But as you pointed out earlier, Diana, in your opening remarks, having the highest turnout in over a century did actually also mean that Donald Trump got 70 million of those votes. So we're going to have to find out, and not that there were maybe shy Trump voters on polls, but clearly our people got the message, vote early, worried about the pandemic. Polls I did for the Asian American community, a lot of people worried about coronavirus, didn't want to stand in long lines. And then you take sort of the opposite, in that chart I showed, if you watch MSNBC, if you're progressive, you believed in the pandemic. If you were a Fox News voter, you didn't. So, those people were more likely to vote on Election Day. And again, maybe in the last couple of days, you took the number of people who were going to vote on Election Day anyway, and then maybe more people voted. That's the one thing we couldn't control, obviously, is how many were going to vote on Election Day.
Okay. Several people are asking about the difference between who the active military supported in 2020 versus 2016.
I don't have that number yet. I'll get back to you all on that one.
And
I know there was in the summer by the Military Times that showed that Joe Biden was doing very well with active duty members serving overseas, but I haven't seen the exit poll number yet. And
do you remember offhand how Hillary Clinton did for 2016?
I do not.
Another question that came up, very strategic. How should donors or volunteers identify close races where they can actually have an impact?
I am sighing because I always have to be careful because I know we're family, but I know this is gonna be online. So I work for Amy McGrath. She ran for the United States Senate in Kentucky, and I know since the election there's been criticism of Amy and of Jamie Harrison, both of whom I think set records for the most amount of money raised in the U.S. Senate campaign. And I know some people were saying, well, that money should have gone somewhere else. And look, I think I don't know if any of my clients are on from Maryland. I'm very loyal to my clients. I was going to say protective, but none of my clients need protection. I'm loyal to my clients. So I'm going to try to not sort of be defensive about this. The thing about the money that Amy and Jamie Harrison raised was it was all online. Most of it was online. And, I don't know, isn't part of sort of democracy and the democratization of politics, are people making their own decisions? So look, I don't know if these critiques are the Cook Political Report, the Rothenberg Report, the New York Times, all the pollsters, they should have been smarter about this and told us that Amy would lose to McConnell by 18 points and that Jamie Harrison would lose to Lindsey Graham by 12. They should have told us that in August. So all these Americans who are going to give money to McGrath or Jamie, not directed by anybody, because they wanted to, that they should have gone to other candidates. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the right solution either. So
Right.
I guess, getting back to the core of the question, if you're a committed progressive and you want to make a difference, okay, and you want, it's hard to know, well, how competitive is Idaho or how competitive is, as Montana. No, I do empathize and sympathize with that. Look, I've talked to some of these people I mentioned, the political handicappers. They're not perfect either. So I don't have a good answer because I'm worried if I give one answer that someone I'm working for in 2022 or 2024 might not get donations. But I will say, knowing the McGrath campaign very well, because I worked for her in both 2020 and 2018, yeah, a lot of it were people who wanted to give to someone like Amy McGrath. And it really wasn't about, can we win Kentucky? It was, we hate Mitch McConnell, right? Mitch McConnell was only senator for one place, or we really like this brave woman who's running against Mitch McConnell.
Right. And I know I know people in that category. So close us out with some more thoughts on Georgia. You said you're working for Jon Ossoff. I just want to remind folks that we are going to WDC will be putting out information on how to participate in those two Senate races. But Fred, you mentioned that you're working with Jon Ossoff, and tell us more about the race, how it's looking, what you expect, and then tell everybody to give money.
Give money, but hey, and this time, and again, I hope I was respectful of the question about donations. Yep. But this time, there's no excuse not to give to Georgia, because those are only two races right now, folks. Right. We have no other choice. Okay, I'll talk about Georgia by sort of going back to 2013 when I first met this young state legislator named Stacey Abrams. And Stacey Abrams had a dream. Okay, her dream, which seemed silly in 2013, and you know who Stacey is. It seems silly for her to think this in 2013, but she had two dreams: that she would be elected governor of Georgia, and that Georgia would vote Democratic in a presidential election. And I've had the honor and privilege of knowing Stacey and working for her since 2013. There are politicians like her. There are a lot of politicians like her, But even with all the obstacles, she had this dream and this vision, and she wasn't going to waver from it. So and I remember talking to her, and this Diana, I promise we'll get to Georgia 2020, is she said that we can keep running elections the same way, or we can open our eyes and realize that in Georgia, there are 1 million people of color who are not registered to vote who can vote. So, Democrats, not that this is an either-or proposition, maybe we should use some of our resources and our energy to register those people and get them to vote. That was her vision in 2013, 2014, that she believed, and I think she's been proven right, that for someone like her to be elected governor and for Democrats to win the presidential, you had to expand the pie. And we almost got there in 2018. She got there in 2020. So what is Georgia's about? I think 5 million people voted in this presidential election, which is a record turnout. There is a tremendous drop-off in votes between an election and a runoff. And folks, it's not like this runoff is in a week where people are still hyper-energized. This runoff is January 5th. Okay, so New Year's, for those of you who are interested, the bowl games, then all of a sudden you got an election January 5th. So I think the strategy is very simple. Again, I think that chart showed there are 2.47 million people who voted for Joe Biden. Making sure that every one of those Joe Biden voters vote in January 5th, that's more than enough for Ossoff and Warnock to win this race. Please give money, because no, wait, Diana, and everyone. Sorry, I get excited about this. Here are a couple things about Georgia that are very important for us and for the WDC. Number one, you can still register to vote for January 5th, I think for another week. Okay, that's number one. Number two, and I'm a parent, like you mentioned, my eldest daughter goes to Villanova. Now all of us, some of us are parents or grandparents. They go home on Thanksgiving, the college students, like most college students. They're probably not coming back after January 5th. So I think the other efforts will be making sure that these college students in Georgia, when they go home, still are able to cast their vote on January 5th.
Good point.
I know it sounds like a very small, minor thing. This is going to be a close election.
Yeah. Yep. And we're going to make it close, and we're going to win. That's the plan. So, Fred, thank you. Thank you for joining us again and for sharing all this wisdom and sharing, especially being willing to share your slides and this recording with the WDC members. Since the advent of, actually a little bit before COVID, WDC has been recording and making available to members the recordings of all of our speakers, going back to, I think, Abigail Spanberger at the very beginning of this year, when our friend Scott Weber started recording for us. So if you're a WDC member, sign into your account and watch it all on YouTube. And if you're not a WDC member, you can fix that. So we really hope you will consider joining the club and be part of our coalition. It's not free to maintain the work that WDC does with our website and a lot of the work we do in Annapolis. So please consider joining. And with that, I just want to remind folks of you still there? Oh, yes, good. Our upcoming WDC events, November 20th, as I said, Councilmember Jawando is going to be talking about changes to county policing standards. November 23rd, shortly thereafter, talking about the women's suffrage and our 100th anniversary at the same time as we're electing the first Vice President-elect, who is a woman of color. And December 2nd, the Marshall Project, again, on criminal justice reform, and December 9th, the county state's attorney, with a to-be-determined date for Diana Phillip from NARAL, pro-choice Maryland. So please join WDC, share the dates for our upcoming events, let people know. And I want to thank again our elected officials for coming. And as Fred said earlier, Georgia, Georgia, Georgia. So thank you, everyone.